Hey guys, welcome to your speedy review on developmental psychology. Remember that this is going to take you from prenatal development all the way through death and dying. Hey guys, so we're talking about prenatal development. First thing that you should remember is that we do need to know the biology. Zygote is from 0 to 2 weeks. Embryo is the area where you're going to have the largest amount of information, strangely. That's going to be 2 to 8 weeks. This is when you start to have blood production. You'll have a heartbeat. The brain starts to develop. Basically, all the systems are developed at this point. This is also going to be the rate or the area where you have the highest rate of miscarriage. This is going to be where the placenta starts to grow. This is where implantation takes place. So the actual mass of cells, the zygote implants itself into the uterine wall and becomes an embryo. So you have the growth of the placenta. And then 8+ weeks, it's a fetus. Teratogens are going to be anything that can pass the placental barrier. So this will include things like alcohol, nicotine, and any viruses. For fetal alcohol syndrome, we're looking at alcohol passing the placental barrier. It's going to be usually within the first 3 months where we're at the highest risk, especially for heavy drinkers, but again, it can happen at any point in a pregnancy. For fetal alcohol syndrome, it is our leading cause of mental retardation. So children who have this are going to have smaller heads, they are going to have flat features, they're going to have cognitive and behavioral issues often resulting from this. Now, none of this is all absolutes, but they tend to be the general markers of this disorder. Nicotine is a stimulant. A embryo or fetus exposed to a large amount of nicotine is going to develop much smaller, so it's going to be an underweight baby. That's kind of the big hallmark that they look for. But the other thing that you should look for on this one is that they're also going to have a hard time with their motor control because of the excess stimulation. Viruses, the flu virus is the one that we're usually concerned about. It has a correlation to schizophrenia. So when we're looking at babies that are exposed to the flu virus, they have a higher correlation than the general population for developing schizophrenia later in life. Motor development, remember that the baby is going to develop from kind of the center out and the head down. You don't need to necessarily remember proxima distal or cephalocaudal trends, but just know that the baby has to sit upright before it can stand. It has to stand before it can walk. It needs to be able to move its arm before it can grasp with its fingers, and it needs to be able to actually do like a full kind of fisted grasp before it can pick things up with just the tips of its fingers. This is all part of maturation. Puberty, primary versus secondary sex characteristics. Primary, they're reproductive. Secondary, they're just expressions, so deepened voices and facial hair for men. That's a secondary sex characteristic. It doesn't allow them to be reproductive. It just shows that they've kind of gone past that point. It's a visual marker, if you will. Brain development, your brain is going to be almost its full weight by 6 years of age. So the size is roughly where it's going to be. It's going to be fully wired when you get to about 25 years. The prefrontal cortex is the last area to develop, and it will spend its time during your adolescence and early adulthood fine-tuning itself. For adulthood, you're going to have gradual physical decline, not in your 30s or your 40s, but like in your 60s, your sense of smell will start to become less. Your hearing will start to become less. Your vision will become less. Your reaction time will have already kind of plateaued and become less. You want to look at crystallized versus fluid intelligence. And again, crystallized intelligence, solid information that grows over time. This is going to be like vocabulary. Fluid intelligence, your ability to speedily abstract knowledge. That's going to be math, technology, etc. The big thing with illness, yes, you will get ill when you get older, but you won't get common illnesses as often. So you're not going to get pink eye all the time or strep throat. You'll have built up a lot of immunity to these very common diseases. The one thing that you're probably going to do is be more susceptible to things like pneumonia. So as your immune system has become more developed, it also becomes a little bit weaker because you are in fact older. Alzheimer's disease, that's a neurodegenerative disease. Plaque builds on the neural connections, the amyloid plaque. We see this in older populations. No, it doesn't happen to everyone who is older. All right, over to the cognitive development. When we're looking at cognitive development, the first person that should come into your mind is going to be Piaget. So Piaget, we're going to look at schemas. Schemas, schematics, it's the mental framework. It's how you organize information in your head. There's one of two ways you can do this. You can assimilate and you bring in similar information. So you see the world in the information that you already currently have. You either enhance it and bring in more of it, or you understand the world as the same. So just kind of see the S as being the same. Accommodation works with change. So there's your C. So you are told that a brontosaurus and a giraffe are not even remotely the same. And you're being told that a giraffe is currently alive and it lives in the savannah, and brontosaurus is extinct and it was a dinosaur, it wasn't even a mammal. You're starting to change where you would place that information on your schema. You're making new categories for it. That's accommodation. You should know Piaget and his stage model. Sensory motor, that's birth to 2 years of age. The child at about 8 months will develop object permanence. You see it, it's there, it leaves, you no longer know where it's gone. So sensory motor, they learn by touching and moving. Pre-operational, this is where we have the entire idea of conservation being the issue. The child cannot do the conservation experiment. So that's the 2 beakers filled with water. You pour one into a skinny one and you ask them which is more, and they say the taller one. Okay, the child can't reverse. They are very centrated. They think of a singular aspect of the problem. They are egocentric at that time. So they have all these problems with trying to kind of have flexibility of thought. Egocentrism is that they see the world as it revolves around them. So it's not uncommon for a 3-year-old to think that the sun rises because it's, the world waking up for them. That's egocentric. They also don't have theory of mind. In other words, they don't really think about what their actions do to other people. They don't walk in other people's footsteps very well. They don't see it from another's perspective, and that actually is a hallmark of autism. Animism also happens during this period. Animism and artificialism. Animism, they believe that anything inanimate has feelings, it has human characteristics. Artificialism, they believe that everything was created by man. So the sun was created by somebody and was, thrown up in the sky or something like that. That would be artificialism. Concrete operation, they have developed conservation. They can reverse thought. They can see it from multiple points of view. They don't get fixated on one central feature. They can do all of these things. Formal operational, that's when you finally see the word hypothetical. So concrete operational is roughly from like 6 or 7 to about 12. Pre-operational is like 2 to like 6 or 7. And remember, one of the criticisms of Piaget is that maybe his age range might have been a little off. Formal operational, roughly 12 years plus. This is where they can do hypotheticals, if-thens, what-ifs, and they're very good at theory of mind. Psychosocial development. The first person that should come to mind is Erik Erikson. So you should remember his 8 stages. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but usually trust versus mistrust is one of the big ones. Identity formation, generativity and stagnation, kind of the big ones that correlate to very large age ranges are usually there. But just go through the 8 stages, know the age range, know what the conflict is. And again, with Erikson, the conflict, the idea was that you either successfully deal with the situation or you have to go back and you have to deal with it later. Attachment styles. When we're looking at attachment styles, we're talking about Ainsworth. So Mary Ainsworth in The Strange Situation. You will get something like in an essay question, if they're asking you about Ainsworth, they will tell you strange situation. You might not, Bromrand is going to be the theorist associated to parenting styles. You might not remember Bromrand, but you should remember parenting styles. So they're going to give you kind of 2 ways to try to remember this information. So Ainsworth looked at secure attachment. You go and kids are securely attached. Parent is there. The child feels safe to explore the environment. Parent leaves. The child shows distress and relief when the parent returns. Insecure attachment or avoidant. If a child is insecurely attached, they may be incredibly clingy and they don't trust that they can go anywhere or do anything without the parent, or they may be avoidant. They're used to being abandoned or things being inconsistent, so they don't even really recognize when the parent is or is not there. The parent is inconsequential to them. Those 2 are both very damaging. Children will have stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Stranger anxiety is going to be roughly around 8 months of age. The child now has object permanence. They understand that when mommy goes into the other room, mommy is still there. Separation anxiety, the child has schemas and familiarity, and they recognize when they do not see something that is familiar to them, and so they are looking again for their parent. Stranger anxiety, 8 months. Separation anxiety, roughly about 12 to 13 months. Healthy, normal children go through both of these. Children have a critical period for things like emotional development, language development, etc., etc. We do not imprint, so you can actually break attachment with a caregiver. The child will show depression, and then you can get them to reattach to a new caregiver. It's why adoption works. Parenting styles. You should know the authoritative, the authoritarian, and the permissive. And remember, I told you everyone likes tater tots. I know it's stupid, but I always, when I say authoritative, I think tater tots. Everyone likes it. That's the optimal one. So it is the responsive caregiver. They set up boundaries. The child is still a child, but they show warmth and affection, but they still parent. Authoritarian, this is the militaristic one. They expect the child to have a better understanding of the world than what the child probably does, to make much more mature decisions, and they expect the child to be almost like little soldiers, and that when they do something wrong, it's because they were too dumb to know better. So it's a very confusing thing. Permissive, the parent lets the child do whatever they want. They're the shot caller. They are the ones that do everything. So there's a militaristic, I will tell you how you think, I will tell you how you feel. I expect you to be far more mature than what you are in understanding these rules and regulations. Permissive, you want to go to bed at 11 o'clock and you're 3 years old, obviously you let the 3-year-old decide. Both of those are damaging. And we talked at the very beginning of this of Erikson. Moral development, you should go to Kohlberg. Carol Gilligan is going to be the person who argues against Kohlberg and his research. Remember, Kohlberg took all of the young men from the Chicago area, gave them the scenario of Hans and a couple of other very similar scenarios to decide where their morality, their moral thinking was, not their moral action, very different things. Pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional, they follow along with Piaget's stages fairly well. Pre-conventional is going to be roughly your, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. They still know that things like killing is wrong. They still have that kind of basic concept, but for them it would be something like someone leaves their wallet in a dressing room. What do you do? And the child that's pre-conventional might go, well, there's no one here and I want that, so I'll take it because I can't get punished. Conventional, the rules are you give it to whomever. Post-conventional, you may sit there and go, well, I'm going to give it to whoever, but I'm also going to call and see if I can track the person down myself. Pre-conventional, it's all about being seen as good and avoiding punishment. Conventional, it's about following rules. Post-conventional, there's a higher ethical principle to follow. For death and dying, that's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Know her 5 stages and also know that this is no longer a theory that we accept in psychology. We're not saying that people don't go through these stages. We're saying that there is not a predictable order to people dealing with death. It all can be very contingent upon an individual. So Piaget, we talked about. Harlow did the rhesus monkey experiment. He was the one that slightly disproved Maslow. He said that monkeys need attention and attachment. They need comfort, and they'll actually go for that before they'll go for food. And he also points us towards the idea that not holding a child, not giving them affection and warmth and love can damage them just as bad as if we were not to feed them. Ainsworth, strange situation. Konrad Lorenz, he's the one that looked at imprinting and showed that birds and ducks will imprint, certain animals will imprint, and that becomes a lifelong attachment. Humans, we do not imprint. Kohlberg, we're looking again at moral development. Gilligan, critic of Kohlberg, and then Erikson, the 8 stages.